Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right?
Oh!
The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa,
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score!
and we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
It's a Victory Monday. It's another edition of the Intangibles coming to you live from the Arrowhead Addict Network. Joining me, it's my partner in crime. It's Christian Ainsworth. My name is Bryce Carter. Christian, it was an absolutely glorious Sunday watching a bunch of teams play each other, get injured, while the Chiefs were sitting at home, resting and celebrating a victory that they had on Thursday night. How was your first NFL Sunday, Christian?
I'd like to say it was easy. Like, we kind of knew it's like the first game of the season. That's the Andy Reid special, right? Outside of the Lions last year, it's like he's always winning them. It's never a huge issue, but like, dude, that was a tough matchup.
Yeah, it was just, going back to the Sunday, like the Thursday was really stressful, right? It always is, especially because, I don't know, there's something about not having any warm-up game to it before where you don't, like, there's no other NFL game. So you're the first NFL game. So everybody is watching and every storyline gets like way blown out of proportion. You forget how stressful it is watching your team when the stakes are there. And, Sunday was just great. Like 7 hours of commercial-free football, Scott Hansen. There's so many things too that happen in the off season that we have this perception that comes into our minds of what the season's going to be like and everything. And then the season starts and you're like, oh wait, like these things that they weren't that way, or they are that way, So it was just so great to see so many of those things. Like, hey, like it turns out Bo Nix carved up the third string Packers in the third preseason game. He might not actually be John Elway. There's just so many great things, but it was awesome to have the Sunday to enjoy. And we've got a lot to talk about today with the Chiefs. We're going to be kind of taking away our 5 biggest takeaways from the Chiefs game. Some of them positive, some of them negative. We're also going to be doing some film review on Xavier Worthy and Kingsley Suamataia. But first, I want to ask you a question, Christian. Thursday night's game against the Ravens, obviously the Chiefs win 27-20. Was that a big win, or are they just lucky to survive?
It's got to be a big win, right? Like, this could be a potentially like late season issue that crops up. Like, hey, Chiefs and Ravens are back to back. They're both tied on the schedule. Who has the tiebreaker? Oh, well, it's, now it's the Kansas City Chiefs, but it could have been the Ravens, which, might have been a huge deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you started out this game, like if you told me somehow Wednesday night that the Chiefs won 27-20 against the Ravens, I'd be like, oh, that's pretty exciting. Like that's really a lot better than I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to be a really tough game that came right down to the wire, which it was, but the final score didn't quite indicate that. I think when you start with the concept of, the Chiefs, they're the perennial Super Bowl contenders, but the Ravens are right there. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. They were an absolute wagon last year. They have a great defense. They have a game-changing quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. And then you add in the layer of Derrick Henry, which, can we just pause for a second and talk about Derrick Henry? Every time that someone's like, oh, Derrick Henry is going to be the huge X factor in this game against the Chiefs, it never happens. It just never happens. But I don't know, man. In some ways, it felt a lot closer than it was, and in some ways, it didn't. Obviously, it came down to literally a toe. That was the difference between the Chiefs winning and losing, but it really kind of felt like a big part of this game came down to the Chiefs were playing with their food, and they let it get the better of them.
Oh, dude, I did not feel that way at all. Like, Lamar was diamond. He had like 5.4 yards average depth of target, but like he was on the ground. He's initiating contact. I thought it was like, oh, we're seeing Lamar not necessarily at his best, but like maybe at his most lethal, especially against our team who has like linebacker problems, pretty shallow defensive end room, it was like, well, this could be a recipe for disaster. I was on the edge of my seat, dude.
This was a Lamar kitchen sink game, right? Like, just throw everything that he had into it. He was taking way more contact than he normally did. And one of the things I think Spagnuolo does the best of is really getting inside quarterbacks' heads and making it difficult for them to interpret and see and changing the picture pre-snap. He did this to Josh Allen in the AFC divisional round too. He basically turned Lamar Jackson into a dink and dunk quarterback where like nothing down the field, took away all of that. About halfway through the third quarter, his average depth of target was about like 1 yard yard beyond the line of scrimmage. They took away any sort of downfield passing game. And basically the Ravens offense was Lamar running, Isaiah Likely, and Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers was extremely limited, but the targets were there for him. But just like the overall production for him wasn't there that much, but he was a big target. And Likely was definitely the best weapon that they had. And a big part of that was is that they were targeting a specific part of the Chiefs defense that they were having success with. But they were all in on this game, right? And you could tell that this meant a lot for the Ravens. And again, I just kind of come back to there was a couple of moments in that game, and I think this is how most really close games are in the NFL with good teams, is that both teams can walk away and say, hey, if 2 or 3 things go different in this game, we could be up by double digits. And I think the Chiefs feel that way, and I think the Ravens might feel that way. I think it's a little bit tougher for the Ravens to say that just based upon the result of the game and what their defense did, but you've got by my count, at least 3 drops that could have potentially been touchdowns. Now, 2 of them were on the same drive, but those were backbreakers. You've got the Chiefs who, they basically were about to get the Ravens off the field there, and then Nick Bolton just like has his back turned and a kind of miracle play by Isaiah Likely and Lamar Jackson just being awesome. But there's a lot of points left on the board, and probably I was looking at the All-22 this morning, one of the most like baffling Patrick Mahomes interceptions I've ever seen. Like they get the ball back with a chance to score before half, and the Chiefs got the ball after half. You're like, oh, they're about to go up double digits here, and then Patrick Mahomes just like targeted the linebacker in that snap. So it was an interesting game. I think we can all just breathe a sigh of relief a little bit afterwards too.
Oh yeah. Well, and if I'm the Ravens, I'm looking at this thinking, did Jawan Taylor suit up for my team this week? Like that was not the Ronnie Stanley that they were used to seeing, or like even regular NFL watchers were used to seeing. Like he's an elite tackle, and he was making some boneheaded mistakes.
Yeah, that's one of those things too. Like, it's very clear that the NFL was trying to make a statement right there, and I'm just glad that the Ravens went out there first. So like Jawan Taylor could see what was happening and be like, oh, hey, you better get yourself up on the line of scrimmage. I thought they were being really ticky-tacky about that. I don't necessarily feel bad because I thought there were some pretty unfortunate calls later going against the Chiefs. And that's the thing about reffing. And like whenever people want to complain about that or Taylor Swift or whatever on Twitter, like reffing is horrible. It's horrible all the time. Name one fan base that is thrilled with the officiating job that's done in games. The thing is that we just want it to be consistent, right? If you're going to call that, call it all the time. Or if you're not going to call that, don't change it because it's the game scenario, right? And that's really the big thing is like, they were definitely picking on Ronnie Stanley. I feel totally comfortable saying that. But guess what? That's happened to the Chiefs before where, Jawan Taylor was the most penalized player in the NFL last year. Now, part of it is there's post-snap penalties, right? False starts, but then he also has holds and things like that and the illegal formations. So he was definitely getting picked on. But yeah, it was a game that we've got some big takeaways to look at. But real quick, I want to go back to that question of, was this a lucky game or was this a really good win? I think it's really hard to discredit any win in the NFL because it's a tough league, any given Sunday, etc. The biggest favorite of the week lost yesterday, right? The Bengals were the biggest favorite on the point spread, and they lost outright to the Patriots, which was super enjoyable to watch, by the way. Love a good hate watch. But yeah, like any given Sunday, right? But I want to go back to this. So Christian, I want to play a little game with you. I haven't prepped him on this. I'm going to just start describing a game to you. And I want you to just let me know when you think you know what game it is. All right. So I'm just going to describe some factors of a game. This is a Chiefs game. What if I told you that the Chiefs faced a Super Bowl contender early in the season in Arrowhead? In that game, the Chiefs would be without one of their top pass catchers and one of their best pass rushers. The Chiefs defense allowed 20 points or more over 115 rushing yards and over 250 passing yards in this game. Both teams, the Chiefs and their opponent, had a turnover in this game. The Chiefs' offense was limited due to drops and a costly interception. The Chiefs lost the time of possession battle. The team that lost was one play away from winning the game. Starting to sound familiar?
I mean, the game last night, or on Thursday, excuse me. That sounds a lot like the game we just played.
You are right that the Chiefs did play in the season opener after winning the Super Bowl, but this game was actually the Lions game from the year prior. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I wanted to illustrate just how close these two games were to like being the exact opposite of each other, right? We're sitting here on Monday having a victory Monday because of a couple of plays went the Chiefs' way. In this instance, in 2023, a couple of things went against the Chiefs' way, and they lost that game by 1 point. Going back to that, so Super Bowl contender, Lions were, I don't know if you want to call them as much as a favorite as the Ravens were, but they definitely were a trendy pick for the Super Bowl because of what the momentum they had. They were without one of their top pass catchers. In 2023, that was Travis Kelce. In 2024 was Hollywood Brown. One of their best pass rushers, 2023, was Chris Jones, who's eating popcorn with his agents in the box. 2024, that's Charles Omenihu. The Chiefs defense allowed 20 points on Thursday night. They allowed 21 to the Lions, over 115 yards rushing. Probably one of the big standout things was the amount of rushing yards the Chiefs gave up Thursday night was way more than against the Lions. Both teams had a turnover. That was true both nights. Chiefs offense was limited due to drops. Obviously, the drops were like the number one thing we were talking about. The drops weren't as egregious, but still, like by my count, there could have been potentially three touchdowns that were had that did not happen because of drops, depending on how you want to do that Juju one in the end zone. This is all just to say, however you feel about this game, you can take off your red and gold glasses and say like, hey, they were really close to losing this game, and there's some things that could definitely be of concern. Or you can look at this game and say like, hey, the Chiefs lost a game at the beginning of the year, and they played way better this time. So it's really kind of how you want to look at it, how you think this game goes down. It's really going to come down to how you want to view it. The defense, I think a lot of people are concerned about the defense after this game. Listen to this. The Chiefs' defense against the Detroit Lions, without Chris Jones, by the way, 19 first downs, 118 rush yards, a touchdown on the ground, 250 yards passing with a passing touchdown, one turnover with 5.25 yards per play. So that's the Chiefs' defense against the Lions. This week against the Ravens, 25 first downs, so 6 more first downs, 185 rush yards. That's the big difference, 1 TD. 267 pass yards to 250 passing yards with a touchdown, 1 turnover, 5.65 yards per play. It's basically the same thing. So if you're someone who's really down on the defense, you're like, oh, the defense, it sucks. It's not going to be good this year. We can just accept that it's not going to be good. They basically had the same game that they had against the Lions, and they were one of the best defenses in the NFL last year. So it's early, but these results, it's really kind of just how you want to look at it.
I'll push back a little bit just because of how they looked against the Lions versus how they looked against the Ravens. Like, you could tell late in the game, like, oh my God, our defense is on its heels. Half these guys, don't even have the win still in them. We're looking at potentially going to overtime. And if the Ravens had it their way, they were going to win the whole thing. Like, for the Lions, it was a little bit different. We didn't have like that star pass rusher that was making impact plays, but like, would Charles Omenihu really have impacted the game as much as Chris Jones would have against the Lions? Like,
I don't know. He made a pretty impactful play in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah,
sure. Strip sack. And also, like, I think probably one of the most obvious things about this game and what started to change it was when Lamar Jackson just started playing hero ball. Chris Jones just was getting gassed. Like, he was living in the backfield in the first half. That Ravens offensive line, you could tell that they were replacing a whole lot of starters. As the game went on, he got more and more tired. Nobody else was winning. Carl Aftis wasn't winning. FAU wasn't winning. Mike Dana wasn't winning. Tershawn Wharton flashed a little bit. He had some good moments, I thought. But that's where that extra pass rusher, I think, would have really helped. Just to have another capable body to rotate in. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm being coy a little bit, right? Like, Hollywood Brown and Charles Omenihu are not quite the same level of players as Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. They're, you've got 2 Hall of Famers versus role players. But it is still interesting just to kind of see, like, one of those games was a loss, one of those games was a win. lucky to survive or big win. It just kind of depends on how you want to look at it, how you want to feel about it. Let's actually kind of get into our 5 observations here now and talk about some of the big takeaways we had from the game. And these are meant to be both positive and negative, and some talking points that we came away with. I think we're in an interesting place. A lot of times we're reacting a day or two after the game, but it's actually been quite some time from the Chiefs game. We've gotten to watch a whole Sunday of football. One thing that jumped out to me this whole Sunday, there was not a lot of passing yards in the NFL this year. Or this week. 185 was the average passing yards for the quarterback. So when you look at that, the Chiefs offense actually seemed like it did really good, especially whenever you consider the level of defense that it faced. But Christian, why don't you go first? Give me your first takeaway from the game on Thursday.
So the end of our conversation there kind of works perfectly well into this. Like, the defense wasn't in playing shape yet. Like, and I think everybody could see it, whether you were watching at home or whether you were in the actual stadium. Like, that final drive and the lack of pass rushing success, like, that was a huge problem late in the game. And I understand it's Lamar Jackson. We're not facing, Danny Dimes or any of these other guys. Respect to your MVP take on him a few years ago, but he's not. He's not.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, revisionist history here. No, but like, it just didn't seem like they had the legs. And I understand, like, they're gonna work their way into playing shape, but this is definitely not in it right now.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that showed. When you add it all up, especially on both sides of the ball, we're gonna get into the Kingsley Suamataia tape in a little bit, but Joe Thuney looked a little rusty, I thought. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't have a whole training camp. Samaje Perine just getting into the offense. You get to the defensive side of the ball. Derek Nottie, Chris Jones, Nick Bolton, Justin Reed, Jalen Watson. Like, the list goes on and on and on of guys who did not play almost any preseason. This was a tough opponent to come out and do this with, especially whenever you factor in what the Ravens offense does to you. It gets you in this big, heavy personnel, and then they pass out of it. And while that is kind of what they do, and it has its limitations, it's also very tough to counter, because you're going to have to counter it with base, and that's where you get those players on the field who aren't necessarily passing down players on the field, covering players like Zay Flowers. But I agree. I thought the rush showed, and by the way, like, I think that's true of the Ravens too. Like, they didn't play most of their starters. Both teams were a little rusty. I think, again, like both teams, there was just a lot of execution things that could have been better, whether it be the penalties, whether it be drops, whether it be, missed opportunities. For instance, Shamari Connor gets his hand on a ball that, like, honestly could have been an interception. It was a good pass attempt or a good pass breakup, but that could have been an interception. So there's a lot of ways you can look at it. But yes, the tire, the exhaustion, the rust, that's something that you hope gets better. Again, we kind of referenced it right when the show opened. The Chiefs have been sitting at home the last 3 days while the NFL, players and the Bengals that are coming to town, they're walking into the training facility. They've got to cross the road to do it because that's their setup. I don't know. Have you seen these? Have you seen the videos of the Bengals players having to cross the road to get to their training facility?
No, I haven't seen that.
So it's like in the middle of Cincinnati, downtown, right? Like, you can see an overpass on their practice field. I don't know if you've ever seen videos of their practice field, but it's actually kind of interesting. It's downtown, so it's kind of a cool vibe. It kind of feels like a downtown ballpark. But then you realize their facility, they have to cross a busy, not a highway, but a city road, where you got to push the button and go, wait.
Told me Jamar Chase is hitting the button to get to the practice facility?
Yes, seriously, go look it up on Twitter. It's actually really funny because it's like, oh my God, like the Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, like these $1 million assets that the team has, they make them walk across the street. In fact, so many people were talking about it the other day that the Bengals, they blocked off the media from taking videos and pictures of it because it was circulating. Because people were dogging on them. But there's all just say, as they cross the highway, hoping that a truck doesn't hit them, as they're playing Frogger walking across the road, they're all sore. Right. And they're doing hot baths and cold baths and ice and all those type of things because they just played an NFL game and the Chiefs have been resting for the last 3 days. So hopefully that recovery for those players who are still getting up to playing speed, hopefully that's something that will be a nice advantage for the Chiefs' favor as the Bengals come into Arrowhead. All right. So my first one, you kind of took my first one there with the rusty ones. So I'm going to go right into the explosive plays. The explosive plays are back in the Chiefs offense. And I think this might be my biggest takeaway. This is something that's really important because the NFL, it has gotten more and more to limiting big explosive plays. Last year, the Chiefs only had 4 touchdowns of 20-plus yards the whole season. Xavier Worthy had 2 on Thursday. The Chiefs, they had 52 passing plays of 20-plus yard and 10 rushing plays of 20-plus yards in 2023. On Thursday night, they had 6 plays of 20 yards or more. And that also is excluding one 19-yard play that they didn't count because I was doing the 20-yard threshold, but they could have had 7 really easily. That is 5%, or that is 10% of their 2023 output in 5% of the games. So basically, they've already had 10% of the 20-plus yard plays that they had all of last year in just the first game. That's a huge difference. And that's without one of their more quick, speedy options at receiver in Hollywood Brown. So it's really exciting to see what it looks like. And I think it's more than just Xavier Worthy is fast. Like that's the shallow level analysis of like, boy, he looked good. And let's just talk about it for a second, right? The end around, he breaks angles when that's one of the things, the first things you learned in football, angle of pursuit, when you're on defense, he breaks those angles. That end around that he had, if you look at that and pause it at a certain spot, it doesn't look like anybody should score there, but he just accelerates through there. And it's so that play was designed for the fastest player in the NFL and it worked, but it's more than just that. It's the space that he's creating and the fact that defenses have to honor it. There was a play with Justin Watson. Mahomes rolls out right and hits Justin Watson. He's just sitting wide open in the middle of the field. And that was one of those 20-plus yard games. And if you're getting that out of Justin Watson, you feel really good, especially without Hollywood Brown on the field. And oh, by the way, in this game, they had 3 completions to Travis Kelce. So it's exciting to think about what this offense is going to be when they're not relying on Travis Kelce all the time and Rashee Rice, who looked excellent in this game as well. But the explosive plays, they're back in the Chiefs offense, and that's something to be excited about.
Oh, yeah, dude. And when you're looking at the team, comparing it to last year, Super Bowl champions, by the way, in case you didn't remember, this is not what the offense looked like at all. We were about 2 plays in to the 2024 season. Patrick Mahomes is making plays. I look over to my brother who's watching the game with me, and I go, this is not even close to the same offense. Like, this doesn't look anything like. The play selection is different. The way that the offensive line doesn't necessarily have to, like, earn every single second of time for Mahomes to make a throw down the field. It's like the little screen plays to Rashee Rice. It's like, oh, we don't have to do that anymore. Like, we did. But it's like we're not so reliant on that anymore that it, like, completely dictates how we play the game. That's invaluable. And showing it this early without Hollywood Brown is something completely different. Like, go ahead.
I was going to say something that stood out to me on the All-22, and maybe I'll have to go back and look. We also are talking about small sample size, right? This is one game, one opponent, one game plan. The amount of empty that the Chiefs ran, where there's no H or Y tight end, no halfback in the backfield, fully empty. That was something that jumped out to me because that is not something we had seen. Obviously Kelce kind of factors into that. He's like their big power slot that they can use there, but those option routes and choice routes and RPOs to Rashee Rice, they were bread and butter, man. And Mahomes was zipping that ball into him, and those pass plays were unstoppable. And credit to them, they basically just kept spamming that slant with Roquan Smith until they like couldn't stop it, right? Or until they finally stopped it. And that's just something that we saw in Sunday Night Football, right, with David Montgomery. There is something so awesome about just being able to do. Your opponent knows exactly what's coming, and they're not able to stop it. So that's something that's exciting because before it was like the Chiefs, they got to have this scheme advantage. They've got to execute. And if all that stuff happens and Mahomes does some magic, they can actually score 17 to 20 points in a game and win with defense. But now, like, they've got this offensive superpower again. So it's exciting to think about. And, to be fair, I do think that the defense will probably take a slight step back, but I don't think that it's going to be horrific. I don't think we're talking 2018 here, but I do think that this could be the best offense that they've had since 2018. We'll have to see. Christian, your next big takeaway.
My next one, we kind of talked about it a little bit. So Rashee Rice's role in the offense seems to have increased, but it hasn't changed. So we saw him running a lot of slants. Like, you see the slant boy memes going around on X right now where Michael Thomas is handing off the baton to Rashee Rice. Like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what he was last year, right? Like, he did some slant work. He did some stuff over the middle of the field, but then he also was, like, at the line of scrimmage or behind. And I'm sure that when they drafted him, that's what they had anticipated him being, like, sort of a over the middle, like, he can get open against man, but like we're primarily going to be looking at him against zone, and then his yak ability just makes it crazy. But like, I'm just looking at it here. So 7 receptions, 108 yards, 78 of those yards were on yak. He got 78 of his 108 receiving yards after he caught the ball. Like, no diss to Rashee Rice and like what you consider to be like a legitimate wide receiver or not, but like Slant Merchant in the Chiefs offense apparently works pretty damn good. Like, I don't know if you can say that he's like a top 10 receiver in the league right now, but like absolutely effective, and especially what he's being used for. But we also saw him with 9 targets as well. So it's very difficult for like, it's kind of hard to like project where he's going to be with Hollywood Brown when he comes back, but like 9 targets is really good. And it's more than he was getting on average last year. So like, even if he hasn't progressed as much as we'd like for him to, and I don't know if we can say that just yet, but he's playing 78% of the snaps. Like, he's on the offense a majority of the time. He's making big time plays. Like, he's going to be a weapon. And I think he's already kind of showing his role as like the guy Mahomes can look towards when he needs somebody to complete it.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about Rashee Rice's and his role, we have to remember where it started at last year too, right? Last year he was a red zone option because he was pretty good at finding those soft spots in the zone, and then he was screen boy. Like, that's what he was before, tunnel screen boy.
Yeah.
And now, like, the average depth of target, it's certainly increased for him. Now, is it ever going to be super high? No, but I don't think that's how he wins. And like, man, I told myself I was going to bring this up. There's a certain person on Twitter who is a very big football content creator, does great work, will remain nameless here, but Xavier Worthy's putting up highlight reel plays. Everyone's talking about him Thursday night. And then there's a play that Patrick Mahomes throws to the end zone where Xavier Worthy, he's just in a bad position. It's a contested catch situation, not where he succeeds. And he tweets out, Keon Coleman would have caught that. And it's like, okay, cool.
I know exactly who you're talking about, by
the
way.
Chiefs.
That's ridiculous.
The Chiefs were never going to draft Keon Coleman. And that has nothing to do with like the Bills or I don't know. It's really stupid because here's the thing. Put players in a position that they're going to succeed. Use their strengths. If you have Bryce Young as your quarterback, don't run a bunch of straight drop back with a bunch of guards that are 6'5" standing in front of them. You got to roll them out of the pocket. Use RPOs, those type of things they did at Alabama. Use players to the best of their ability and their strengths. Rashee Rice's strengths are the yak ability and where he wins at the catch point in the intermediate part of the field. He is explosive with the ball in his hands, and his turn up field is some of the best in the NFL. Is he ever going to be that top 10 wide receiver who can just do it all? No, I don't think so. But also, I think like Amon-Ra St. Brown is another player who has a very distinguished, specific role in his offense and is still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL at his job. And I really think like that's the comparison for Rashee Rice, like what he does in role, that with a little bit of Debo with the yak stuff. I'll be interested to see if they keep using. They did use him on a screen at one point in this game. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting because again, the space, it's all there. And I think you take away some of that stuff off of Travis Kelce's plate, it's always going to be about with him, keeping him healthy for the stretch run. That's what that's basically what all the analysis have been about Travis Kelce this whole time. And we saw him be fairly limited in this game. That's actually one of the observations I had here was just, what is Travis Kelce's role in this offense going forward? He played 89% of the snaps in this game. That really surprised me. I figured when I was going to pull up the snap counts, I was going to see 57, maybe 60%, especially with we get Noah Gray contract extension hours before kick, which is, by the way, like one of the things I just never really was on my radar. I always thought when Jared Wiley was drafted, it's like, all right, this is the Noah Gray replacement, this wide receiver 2. I always knew that Noah Gray was going to get paid more than we expected because I think he does a lot of things really well. And a lot of us, we've had a superhero at tight end for so long in Kansas City that we're just used to that position being like a glorified wide receiver. But a lot of teams, they will pay up for these tight end 2 types, your, Jake Ferguson's of the world or Dawson Knox or whatever, because they're useful players. They can be on the field a lot. They can play special teams. They can block. They're kind of chess pieces on the board. But I was really surprised by that. But going back to the Travis Kelce thing, he only gets targeted 4 times. Noah Gray gets targeted 3 times and actually has more yards than him. Wiley played 20% of the snaps. Peyton Hendershot, healthy scratch for the game. What are they thinking here with the Travis Kelce role? Was this just a defense specific type of thing where like we've got a certain look that we want? I was just surprised to see him playing that many snaps, and it'll be interesting to see if that's the plan going forward. Because I always thought the plan this season was going to be let's get him in there on those crucial downs, those, third downs, which, by the way, the completion that Mahomes had to pass Lynn Dawson as the all-time franchise leading passer, that's where you need Travis Kelce. That was a 3rd and long play. He does exactly what they have done so long. I thought it was so fitting that was the pass, because it's out of structure. It's just those two being on the same page with each other. They're like jazz, instrumentalists, right? They're vibing. They're just going off the beat. They just are on the same page with each other as they're improvising. But yeah, I'm interested to see what is the future of the Travis Kelce role in this offense.
Well, and you talked about it maybe being like a defensive specific thing where it's like, hey, he didn't go to a whole lot of targets. Like, I saw Kyle Hamilton shading him a bunch this game when I rewatched the All-22. And Kyle Hamilton, I had some concerns about him coming out of the draft, but he's a legitimate safety who is exactly who you want guarding Travis Kelce. Like, long arms, tall, athletic, maybe not as rangy, but it's Travis Kelce. It's not Xavier Worthy he has to try to guard. So, like, him getting pressed off the line, him and dropping back and making it difficult in zone, like, they didn't really have to throw it to him either. Like, the RPO game that we had was so strong that, if we can pick on Roquan Smith in coverage and he becomes their Nick Bolton, like, hell yeah, do it.
Yeah, and I think that might be the answer. It's just that Kyle Hamilton is probably one of the premier safeties in the league and one of the best, Kelce matches you can have, which just makes his AFC Championship game even more special. Perfect 11 for 11, over 100 yards, the touchdown against Kyle Hamilton. Like, that was just a super special performance, and it's okay that he didn't replicate that. And guess what? Like, the Chiefs offense, the nice thing now is they've got options, so Kelce doesn't have to do that all the time. It felt like last year, if you were going to win a big game, you needed that from Kelce. And this year, maybe he can be a little bit more of a decoy, and that's okay. I feel like some of the later years with Gronk, he was as much a decoy as he was an actual option. So let's move on to your next one, Christian.
So the next one that I had, it's kind of riffing off of yours a little bit, but the offense was attacking the Ravens in multiple ways, and I don't think that that's something we saw a whole lot of last year. You talked about like the explosive plays and Xavier Worthy making a huge impact. Like, we had that, which we hadn't seen in a while. We ran some spread stuff, or like some spread option where it was just Mahomes and Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield, and it was 5 up front, 4 out wide. And yeah, we're just going to, if the box is light, we're going to run into it. Isaiah Pacheco was a beast yesterday or on Thursday, excuse me. And then we ran power fairly often, which I was really, really surprised to see. Like, that is not something that we run nearly at all, even though we could be so incredible at it. Like Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey going out, or we ran that GH counter where it's the end around with Xavier Worthy. It's like, yeah, we don't run that type of stuff. Why? Partially because we don't have the pieces, or we didn't have the chess pieces that we could play it with last year. But also it's like, dude, when Mahomes is ripping it, and he was on Thursday, I keep saying yesterday. When he's diamond like that, it's so difficult to make it seem like the Chiefs offense is bad. And I mean that you can't compress them down into what they were last year. Again, we talked about this earlier, making them throw short screens, making them throw wide receiver screens, making them run outside zone with Isaiah Pacheco. It's put them into these boxes. Hopefully Mahomes doesn't kill you. And then, you live and die by what your offense can do against the Chiefs defense. But it's Thursday just seems so different. And rewatching it, watching the All-22, you can see the impact of the new additions and the different play calling, and it was beautiful. It was insane to watch.
Yeah, I thought you could tell Andy Reid had been dipping into the Shanahan bag a little bit this offseason. He's been really resilient to some of those ideas, but the tight end motion to turn it into counter, where you've got Kelce coming off of the H, and then he comes into the backfield kind of functioning as a fullback and turns it into counter where they take the false step. That was really nice. And I think Kelce had some really nice moments as a blocker. Don't tell the George Kittle fans that Kelce actually blocks, but it was kind of nice to see. And another thing I liked, they have Isaiah Pacheco, who reportedly has taken a step forward as a receiver. Actually, he was the fastest ball carrier in this game, according to Next Gen Stats, over 19 miles an hour on that. It was just a little flare-out route that he had, but it was a big gain. Also, they have him in the backfield, and they start that motion where they start running to the sideline out wide. So he's right by Mahomes in the shotgun, then starts flaring out wide, and then is running as the snap goes. It was nice to see some of those ideas incorporated there. It's exciting, kind of seeing the constant development of the offense. But yeah, I thought that there were some really nice signs with what they're doing offensively. And we know that Andy doesn't usually like to show things. If this was a week 1 game against an opponent that the Chiefs didn't feel like was an AFC contender, we probably don't see as many of these things. I think we'll see it again next week with the Bengals, especially with a chance to go up 2 games on them, because you feel like these are probably some teams that are going to factor into the AFC seeding. But some really encouraging sides. I'm going to actually switch the other side of the ball, and we've got to do it, Christian. You weren't getting off this easy, all right? Mizzou looked awesome on Saturday again. I was watching the Nebraska game, which was just pure enjoyment. But Mizzou looked great on Saturday. Nick Bolton did not look good on Thursday, all right? So there's a compliment. There's the good old compliment sandwich. My guy, the armband on him, it has to be made of lead. That elbow brace that he had on, because my guy looked slow. He was getting abused in coverage. And I want to be realistic here. He does a lot of really good things that are really important to this defense. Cerebral, captain on the field, blah, 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 all those type of things. But if this is what Nick Bolton is in the year 2024, they cannot run him out at middle linebacker as their 3-down backer. It just can't happen.
Well, okay. I mean, you're being a little harsh there. It was 1 game.
3 down. So I'm talking about like passing downs, right? Like I'm totally cool with him being out there on 2nd and 10, those type of downs. But man, oh man, they would, if that's the version of him that they're getting this year, they have to think about doing Drew Tranquill at the mic, and then like maybe mixing in Jaden Hicks at the will, which is something that jumped out to me too. 0 defensive snaps for Jaden Hicks. That's completely opposite of what I expected based off of how his preseason looked. Maybe that's something they think about where like Jaden Hicks is kind of functioning like Willie Gay. I don't know, man, but that was something that was a little concerning, especially whenever you factor in that this team isn't particularly dynamic in the areas that some of these other teams are. Like Chase Brown, the running back for the Bengals, was one of the fastest ball carriers in the NFL last year, as fast as Tyreek Hill, according to Next Gen Stats. That's the passing down back for the Bengals. That player against Nick Bolton is scary, right? Like we saw Justice Hill have kind of a big game here, not necessarily in the stat sheet, but in like extending drives. Like Justice Hill was crucial to the Ravens extending drives. So we definitely need to see a different version of Nick Bolton, particularly on pass downs. But my thing is with Nick Bolton, you always got like, it was like Sour Patch Kids, right? They're salt, or they're sour and then they're sweet. Like you get the splash plays and then the negative, right? I'm used to seeing him shoot gaps and make a huge impact play in the run game. Those feel like those come less and less nowadays. And we still get all of the negatives.
Well, okay. So let's think about the most recent games that we've watched the Chiefs play. The Ravens with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Jeez. We watched him against Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers. We watched him against the Ravens again with a better offensive line and in the playoffs. Like the last 3 games that we've seen, he's playing up against the hardest, most intimidating offenses as far as run plays go in the league. And I understand that he's not exactly performing as much as we'd like for him to be, or as well as we'd like for him to be. And that game was bad. Don't get me wrong. But like, he's still the leader of the defense. He still has the ability to make plays that we don't necessarily get to see, like calling things out, moving defensive linemen over, making impact plays off the field. But like, dude, what else would you like for him to do? Like legitimately, we know what he is.
The answer is play better. But how is he going to play better? Well, so I think here's the thing. I think that just his inability to be athletic enough to cover players out of the backfield, that is the thing that is really limiting him. And then certainly if he's running in coverage with the tight end, to me, I think the thing that, and I want to be careful because like, I don't think that Willie Gay was some superstar here in Kansas City. For some reason, Willie Gay kind of always had this like really strong following of Chiefs fans who just never wanted to give up on the upside and the athlete that he was, which was awesome. But I think this might have been a game that the Chiefs missed Willie Gay a little bit, given that you've got a guy who's 6'1", 240 pounds, probably the best athlete, raw athlete of the linebacking core, though Leo Chanel is also kind of a relative athletic score freak. But having that guy to put on the perimeter to go east and west and really like help lock down some of the perimeter stuff that they have with Lamar Jackson or things that they did with Zay Flowers. I think this might have been a time that they missed him. Nick Bolton probably would have been doing the same role that he was, but I think having Willie Gay also on the field probably would have helped. And again, they looked gassed too, so having another linebacker that they trust probably helped. Like right now, the linebacking core, it went from 4 players who played, starter level snaps to now it's 3. And also last year at the beginning of the year, Drew Tranquill did not play much. He started playing more and more as the season went on. And I think this is actually part of a bigger story of the Chiefs defense as a whole this year. They don't have that depth that they've had in years past. You don't have Willie Gay. You don't have Mike Edwards. Drew Tranquill was that depth addition last year. And they're about a body short on the pass rush right now too until Charles Minihue gets back. So again, my point is more of, I don't think that Nick Bolton it sucks now. My point is, if this is what Nick Bolton is going to look like this year, they're going to have to change things because teams with better quarterbacks, teams with better offensive weapons, they're going to really abuse that. And we've seen Nick Bolton get abused before in the passing game. The Bills, they come out, they target him with James Cook. It's hard because it's a great defense, and it was last year, but every great defense has a weak link. And I just think that this particular weak link can be very exposed, especially if this is what he's going to look like.
So just to be clear, Nick Bolton is the weak link on the defense? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know how you watch that game and don't come up with a different takeaway.
Okay, he had a bad game, and I won't defend that his previous game was.
It's not a one game. It's not a one game thing though. Like this.
Okay, but here's the thing: what we talked about putting players in positions to make plays that are most advantageous to what they do best, right? Okay, Nick Bolton was never going to be fantastic in coverage. He just never was going to be. Like he's gotten better. And, that limits the Chiefs defense in some ways, but that's why they got Drew Tranquill. And so, you know what? Maybe he isn't the best at shooting gaps anymore, right? But we have Leo Chanel, who we can talk about in a minute, was kind of used completely differently than what we were used to seeing him being used as. And then he is supposed to be leading the defense, the defensive line, the linebackers, setting people up in the slot. And then now he has to go above and beyond. We never expected him to be like Fred Warner or anybody like that.
Well,
he's
no,
certainly better than FAU if we're going to talk about guys who are playing lots of downs. And
FAU's playing because of injury, right? The plan was not to rely on him this heavily until Minihue got hurt, and the Chiefs still made a move at edge, right? Though that player didn't play very much. I mean, my thing is just defenses have been going at Nick Bolton for a long time. Now the Chiefs, they've had the ability to do enough to kind of cover that up. And every system has a weak link, right? Every great offensive line has the worst player on it. Doesn't mean that it's a bad offensive line. But my point is that the regression has been pretty substantial in this past game. And it again, if this is the current version, I think they will have to do something. And also you said it yourself, they brought Drew Tranquill in to kind of overcome some of those shortcomings, weaknesses from Nick Bolton. That's where I would like to see Drew Tranquill. If Drew Tranquill is the best if Drew Tranquill is the best coverage linebacker, let's make sure he is on the field in the role to be successful. I would just like to see him at the mic more, but that's just me.
Well, and we can both agree, we don't want Nick Bolton one-on-one with George Kittle. We don't want to see him on Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely. It's that's just not where he shines. So yeah, if you're just saying you'd like to see Drew a little bit more, middle linebacker and playing more coverage snaps, then absolutely. Yeah. If we get into dime personnel, Nick Bolton doesn't have to be the only linebacker we put out there. We can have somebody else that can step up and be a little bit better in those situations. And
I think again, this always has to be said, but hey, look, I could never do any of the things Nick Bolton does. He's a really good player. We don't understand everything that he does. It's just, you want to make sure that the ceiling of the defense isn't limited by one player. So that's really my thing with it. Let's move on. We're bogging down a little bit on Nick Bolton discourse, which is really just totally on brand for Chiefs Twitter in general. Your next takeaway.
So we talked about it a little bit, the interesting personnel decisions on defense, using Leo Chanel as a stand-up edge rusher. That was kind of weird to see, especially with Cam Thomas being brought in, one of those guys that can rotate in. FAU gets 18 plays, no Jaden Hicks. I was really, I don't want to say flabbergasted, because a lot of it we could kind of see coming. We knew Chamar O'Connor was going to be playing the slot a lot. We knew that, it was probably going to be Justin Watson or Jamison Williams that was out there. on the outside, like opposite Trent McDuffie. But I mean, did anything stand out to you that was like absolutely ridiculous that we put out there? I like that Leo Chanel can play outside, like up on the line, but I don't know if that's where he's best used.
He was obviously the spy for Lamar Jackson almost this whole game, that he was using that role quite a bit. It'll be interesting. Again, I think like the defense, it's hard to have a huge takeaway from the coverage side of things and the usage and the role because of how unique the Ravens are. I think we'll get a much better look, especially if T. Higgins plays this week, at what this team looks against, like a team that can really throw a lot of wide receivers out there. It'll just be kind of interesting to see how that breaks down. I thought Felix Anudike-Uzomah played a pretty healthy amount of snaps for what he is. And I thought he looked, during preseason, he looked unplayable, especially against backups. I thought he looked all right in more limited reps. And I think he was playing a ton of snaps in the preseason. So exhaustion probably had something to do with that. He made a nice couple hustle plays, which, I mean, at least you can ask for that, right? If he's not going to be super dynamic off the ball or those type of things, at least like be a good hustle player, which he did. So that's good. But yeah, I thought, again, you just have a team that runs a really unique style of offense. And even then, they just at some point started spamming the Lamar scramble button. And that was very clearly a kitchen sink game for them. So be interesting to see what it looks like against a guy who's imminently more sackable in Joe Burrow, which, I haven't looked at the Bengals all 22, but some of my friends who do and have been looking at them, it's pretty rough. It looks like he's just not playing the way he was before. I don't know if that was a wide receiver thing, if he just wasn't trusting them. Maybe it's a Patriots defense thing, but it'll be interesting to see what it looks like against a much more different style of offense.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you saw like his average depth of target or any of that for this past game, but like he had a lot of passes that were like within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, like the not a morning person, like some people, they wake up, they roll out of bed, they're ready to go. That's me. Like I'm a morning person. My wife, like, don't talk to her until like 10 a.m. Right? So like he's not a morning person. They're not an early season people, I guess, because they finally had him there for the whole preseason, all of training camp, and it was still a really rough start for the Bengals. Real quick, we wanted to get to our film review. I was just going to bring up Chiefs cornerback depth looked good in this game. Again, it's a lot different when you're going against Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar compared to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Jermaine Burton, or maybe a team down the road that's got some really dynamic wide receivers. But so far, Jalen Watson had a pretty good night. We didn't notice Joshua Williams much. Pretty nice night in coverage for the team as a whole. Probably the biggest game was Rashad Bateman, kind of a broken play there at the end of the game when they were in prevent, and then the Isaiah Likely touchdown was on a linebacker. So that was pretty encouraging to see. I feel good about the corner depth, which is something I didn't think we'd be saying after week one.
Oh my God, yeah. Are you kidding? Like we watched the preseason, we saw them make a bunch of moves, not necessarily like changing players or anything, but like there was lots of movement. Lots of different players were getting weird snap amounts. Like Justin Watson played a lot in the preseason. I don't think anybody thought that he was going to be like, step up. Like when I was choosing between him and Williams, it's like, oh, Williams clearly is going to step up and be that guy. Watson kind of showed out. And then you have Shamari Connor, who like probably should have had 2 picks. And Jameson Williams, like another great player playing on the outside. I just really want to see Jaden Hicks, dude. That was the only thing that I looked at. Like, 0 snaps? Really?
Believe me, as someone who wrote an article called Jaden Hicks could be the X factor against the Ravens, I too would have liked to see Jaden Hicks. Instead, he was the X on the gunning of the punt coverage, and that was it. But that's okay. All right, let's shift gears here a little bit. So a couple of weeks ago, we showed some All-22 on here, which is really cool. We got a lot of really good feedback, and we would love to come in here and show All-22. But YouTube doesn't like that very much, and our videos they don't like when we show All-22. So we're playing with some ideas. We might bring back the film room or something at some point. I know that's something that we used to do for our Ring of Honor members for Arrowhead Addict. But for today, we're just going to talk about some of our takeaways of Xavier Worthy and Kingsley Suamataia. For those of you that don't know, Christian is a high school football coach, a 2-0 high school football coach, by the way.
Right.
And he coaches wide receivers. So this guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to wide receiver play. And he reviewed the Xavier Worthy tape Christian, one thing that I'm interested to hear you talk about, we saw the plays where Xavier Worthy made an impact. Those were the plays where he caught the ball, right? He got the end around, scores a touchdown, wide open. I've heard some people say like, oh, Sky Moore could have scored on that play. No, because he caught the ball. All right. So no. And he was in the right place, right? And then I don't know. Here's the thing. Broken coverage play or not, it's a lot harder to recover when someone is extremely fast. Marlon Humphrey misses him, but maybe he would have been able to recover if that was Sky Moore or MVS. But when it's the fastest man in the NFL or one of the fastest men in the NFL, it's a lot harder to recover. Coverages break easier when it's the faster player in the league. So what I'm interested to hear is, what did the rest of it look like? How did he look in running routes down the field? Were there some missed shots, some opportunities, or how did the size look? What were some of your observations from the All-22?
So we all remember the play where it was thrown up to Xavier Worthy in the corner of the end zone.
Oh, if only he was Keon Coleman. If only.
I know. And unfortunately for us Chiefs fans, he's not Keon Coleman. I was actually really high on him during the draft and really wanted the Chiefs to draft him. Knew it wasn't going to happen, but Keon's still a dog. Anyway, no, we're never going to expect him to win like that. And so you look at a play like that and you see the controversy around it. That's never going to be him. So we don't have to worry about him winning on 50-50 balls in the corner.
Oh, but the Chiefs always use these big contested catches receivers, right? They rely on that so much for their offense. They've barely had any team success without it.
That's what I'm saying. Dude, if they could just add, if Xavier Worthy was 4 inches taller and 300 pounds heavier, we might have a legit wide receiver weapon on our hands. But no, dude, there were a few plays that I really wanted to look at. 2 of them were the big plays that he made, but then there was another 2 where he made, let me just start here. So 71.3 PFF grade. I think that is a ridiculously low grade of his performance. I think that he was open way more often than he wasn't. And especially down the field, the problem is the offensive line was a little shaky at times. The 2 plays that I was going to look at where he didn't get the ball but still won, it was an offensive line issue where he's wide open down the sideline on a fade on the outside, and Mahomes can't get him the ball. Now, obviously, we expect that to change. Kingsley Suamataia, you're going to talk about him in a second and how he's going to progress, but those plays are going to come. The 2 plays where he played incredibly well and where we saw him make giant plays, that end around that GH counter where he wraps around and cuts through all the offensive or defensive players and makes the touchdown. I'm not sure that any other player in NFL history can make that play. And I mean that legitimately. When I watched it back and he cuts through the line, there's no way that anybody can get Tyreek Hill's fast enough to do it. Is he skinny enough to do it? I think he probably knocks elbows or shoulders with some people while he's running through that tight lane. Xavier Worthy doesn't have that problem. Maybe Justin Ross in his prime could make that play.
John Ross, you mean?
Oh, John Ross. Yeah. Who did I say?
You said Justin. Big
Justin
difference.
Ross. Oh,
literally
yeah.
Big.
No, not Justin Ross. Yeah, John Ross maybe at his prime. Tavon Austin maybe.
Oh, Tavon Austin. Tavon Austin, West Virginia highlight clips. The special place my heart. Okay, continue.
Yeah, but then on that fade down the side, we all remember it where Patrick Mahomes looks out of the corner of his eye, hits Xavier Worthy for a big play. That's what we're going to see a lot of. And not necessarily that it was broken, because when you look at it, the cornerback is supposed to have flats and is supposed to hand that guy off, or thinks he's supposed to hand that guy off deep to his safety. That ends up not being the case. He's supposed to take him the whole way. He's wide open. There are so many players and there are so many plays that happen in an NFL game, right? You have all of these maybe what-if plays. That one turned out to not be a what-if play. I'm convinced that even if that safety came over, this is still a touchdown. This is still a very, very large play. Might even be a touchdown if Xavier Worthy gets the ball there and he's still in coverage. His ability to get open along the sideline and deep downfield. We talked about the big plays that actually happened this year, this game, that haven't happened since Tyreek Hill was here. We are about to see, and I don't want to put too much hype on him because he is still a rookie. It's going to be his second game when he plays against the Bengals. I legitimately think he could be a 1,000-yard receiver. Legitimately. And not only because he has those breakaway ability, but no defenses are planning for that. the Ravens had all this time in the world to prepare for Xavier Worthy deep down the field. Xavier should have had at least 40 more yards on the day. The offensive line just couldn't hold up for long enough. And if you're telling me Xavier Worthy gets, what did he have? Like 50 yards both ways, like a 40-yard pass and a big play running. If you add another 40 and he gets 80, 90 yards receiving in this game, and Rashee Rice has 108, and Hollywood Brown is back, and he gets 70, 80 yards, like Mahomes could be not 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards, but like 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns. I think like we could really see this offense like jump, make that giant leap back to what they were in 2018.
Route tree wise, what did it look like? Did it look like more kind of the MVS field stretching plan, a lot more intermediate? How did that look? How many routes did you kind of get a look at it for him?
So I picked up about 4 different routes. He ran some stuff. He ran one route underneath. It was kind of hard to tell. It was like a drag across the inside of the field. It was on that last play.
I thought that completion with the drag was actually the most exciting thing that I saw, which I know is weird because he had some really dynamic plays, but the speed when he had the ball in his hands, you heard Collinsworth going, "Oh," like, which was funny. But that speed where it's like, oh, this is, it's more than just the field stretch. It's also like what it can do in the intermediate, because a lot of Tyreek Hill highlights back when he was a Chief were getting the ball in the 15 to 20 yard area and then breaking angles and yak ability, which is something he did a lot there. So that was exciting. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are really encouraging. Again, you're seeing it without Hollywood Brown. I think that it's really good that we saw the high snap count. That's the thing that jumped out to me for him, right? Mm-hmm. This is not a guy who is being shielded from the offense. They've been very high on how quickly he learned the offense and how quickly he was growing into it. Super exciting to see if this is the week 1 product against a defense that prides itself on being very complex to read and understand post snap, which is part of what he's doing, right? As a wide receiver, you're doing more than just running routes at the NFL level. You're reading coverages, you're reading defenders, leverage, those type of things, and where to go. So some really, really good signs. Feels like the only direction is up for the offense. Andy Reid at the mic today said that there's progress from Hollywood Brown. He wouldn't fully commit to him practicing this week, but he said he was close, it's direct quote. So Hollywood Brown back this week. Be really exciting to see what that looks like, especially whenever you factor in like Samaje Perine gets another week. So yeah, really exciting stuff there. Let's move on to Kingsley Suamataia. So I took a look at all of Kingsley's snaps in week 1. I really wanted to dive into his snaps because I'd seen a lot of variety of analysis on it. Everything from really bad, concerning, give Donovan Smith a call, to really bright, shining star, the arrow is only pointing up. And like most things in life, the answer is somewhere in the middle there. So what I went ahead and did is I chart pass rush wins, pass rush neutrals, pass rush losses. I didn't do the runs this week. Part of it was just a time restriction. Also, part of it is I feel like it's much harder for something to be a true run block win. I feel like it's either a neutral or a loss. Like you either held your assignment or you didn't. Run block wins, I guess that's, a pancake, or you're just like really winning at the point of attack. It's a little bit more clear with rush lanes, especially if you're the backside blocker, right? Like, hey, just seal your man off, you're fine. So one of the things I thought was the most encouraging, if you want to, it's kind of like this whole game in general. You can look at it one day and just be like, oh, only optimism. The arrow is just pointing so far up, like we are so back. Or you can look at it and be like, there were some things that were kind of scary here. This kind of eked out a win. Kingsley Suamataia, the results, a little bit scary. So I have him at 8 pass rush wins, clear reps where I felt like he absolutely won that rep and was a plus to be on the field. These are the spots a little bit more concerning. Pass rush neutrals, 16, which I'm always going to err more towards the side of neutral than loss or positive, just because I want to give that player the benefit of the doubt. Basically, that just means like if I've got some sort of bias, whether I want him to be really good or not be good, I'm going to lean more towards the neutral. Pass rush losses. This is the problem. 7. There were 7 snaps that I felt like he definitively lost, and that was out of their 28 total pass attempts, right? 7 is untenable. If he's going to lose 7 snaps a game, that's pretty scary. Now, to the optimistic side, only 2 snaps in pass protection was he added help. Someone chipped a tight end next to him or a running back. One of them was Travis Kelce. One of them was Samaje Perine. There were a couple of snaps where they had a Y tight end lined up next to him, where the edge defender lined up on the outside of that Y tight end. So he had a little bit of extra space to work, and he did better in those snaps. But he wasn't providing much help, which makes you think the Chiefs trust this player and think that he can handle this. If the Chiefs offense can get back, we talked to how much empty they ran. Part of the reason why they haven't been running empty is because they needed extra men in protection because of Donovan Smith, because of Juwan Taylor or Andrew Wiley or Orlando Brown. If this offense can get back to that, part of the dirty little secret about passing the ball deep is you got to have protection, right? Even if you got the fastest man in the NFL, it still takes 2 or 3 seconds to get down the field for him to be open. So they have to be able to protect. I thought just watching Kingsley Suamataia, the thing was it was the ultimate roller coaster. The highs were really high, the lows were kind of low. The pass set looks really nice and smooth. Really great job of pushing off his right leg, coming back in the pass set. To me, it was all about the hands and the hips. If he got his hands on someone, a lot of times that rep was close to a win or a neutral. The hips, he tends to lean and bend at the waist a little bit. And some of the reps that you see him losing, he's losing them because he's overextended in a position that's not necessarily athletic, and some of the other players are able to rip. The sack that David Ojabo ran against him, he had a little hand fighting moment, and Suamataia just completely whiffs on getting his hands on him, and then he's left basically just holding on. And you can see him getting overextended where he's more or less holding on instead of blocking. So there's a lot of hand things there that I think will continue to grow. But the thing that continues to pop to me, if you're looking at the optimistic side, is how smooth he looks, and then the athleticism to be able to recover. Those snaps where he looks like he loses, the loss isn't horrible. You go back to players like Orlando Brown or even Donovan Smith a little bit. They were always good for 1 or 2 reps a game that the loss was just egregious. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at avoiding sacks. You can work with that because the losses, they aren't so dramatic. And the run game, like I said, I didn't do a ton of run game analysis, but I did look over the snaps. That athleticism, it really does shine there. It's exciting to see. I think, in the run game, finishing blocks sometimes was a little bit of a problem. Like he got to his spot and it looked like he was in the right spot, but when he gets there, what is he doing? Is he finishing through the block, or is he just getting his hands on someone? But overall, like I said, it was very up and down. I do think if I had to go closer to really great, really disappointing, I probably lean a little bit toward disappointing, which I feel bad for saying because I know that's not what we want to hear. But I just think the pure pass sets are the thing. They put a lot on his plate. So there's a lot of reason for optimism to think that he's going to get better. They did not provide him a bunch of help. And maybe against a game with a dominant pass rusher, if that's Myles Garrett, if that's Trey Hendrickson, who's a very good pass rusher next week, maybe they do bring in some help and the results look a lot better.
Well, I was going to say, it's really interesting that they didn't provide him with a whole lot of help. This is a defensive line that has some legitimate talent. Odafe Owe, pretty good player. Never turned out to be what everybody kind of expected him to be, but legitimate player. David Ojabo, huge guy out of Michigan. I was banging the table for the Chiefs to draft him before he got his leg injured in the pro day he had. But a very explosive, very high level pass rusher. And if he did okay enough, right? And which that's what I'm hearing you're saying. He did pretty good, not fantastic, not extremely below average, just good. The Chiefs can work with that. I expected him not to start this year because of how raw he was coming out of college. So if he's progressed that much already, has all this season left, and can get help, it's a non-starter. He's better. He's going to be better than Donovan Smith. And I think long term, you're a little bit more happy with that result than keeping around somebody like him or Bakhtiari, who has an injury history, and the ceiling is as far as it's going to get.
Yeah, I think the start point is the exciting point, right? This is probably about what you'd expect from a Donovan Smith game. Less penalties. There was only one called on him. Donovan Smith tend to stack up the penalties as well. And it's certainly a little bit more encouraging than what you had seen from Wanya Morris from last year. So that's the exciting part. I think it's really good to start point. Just be interesting to see where they go. They've got a great offensive line coach in Andy Heck. I also thought Joe Tooney and Creed Humphrey didn't have their best day either. They've got some really good players on the interior of that defensive line, and it's a tough front. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like. Good news is the Bengals were getting gashed on the run. last week yesterday against the Patriots. So I think that they could have a much better day against that Patriots defensive front or the Bengals defensive front. So that's going to do it for us today here on the show. We thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you're listening to Arrowhead Addict and become a member so you can hear our exclusive interviews with players like Tony Gonzalez, Creed Humphrey, Hollywood Brown. All those are up for the members only on YouTube, but you'd like to watch us talk to those guys, you're going to have to become a member to do that. Those are member exclusives. And make sure you're tuning in the rest of the week. We're going to have a show every day of the week leading up to the Bengals game. It's one of the best rivalries in the NFL. It's a great time to be a Chiefs fan, and it's a great time to be listening in on Arrowhead Addict. Thank you, Christian, for joining me as always. And thank you, producer Richard, who just does a flawless job at keeping this show running. And as always, go Chiefs.